Everyone in the office knew Marlene Jenkins as the quiet one, the kind of woman who slipped into her cubicle with the morning light, kept her head down, and left exactly when the clock struck 5, a single mother of 2 teenagers, widowed far too soon. She never asked for favors or made waves, just did her work with quiet diligence and a hope that someday, life would stop feeling like a battle for survival, that the sting of her husband's sudden passing from pancreatic cancer wouldn't weigh down every breath, every decision, every night spent poring over bills and homework and unanswered prayers. She didn't dress flashy or speak loudly, she didn't schmooze with upper management or join the after-work happy hours. She simply showed up, did her job, and went home to care for her children, who had once asked her tearfully if they were poor now that daddy was gone, to which she could only say, "We have love, and that's the richest thing of all," even though she knew love didn't pay tuition or fix broken water heaters, and though she was soft-spoken and reserved, she was also smart, very smart, smarter than anyone in the department probably realized, since she rarely spoke up in meetings and never challenged anyone, least of all her supervisor Brian, a man who looked like he stepped out of a catalog and acted like the office was his personal stage, where he performed his role as the ambitious, sharp-tongued leader who believed pressure made diamonds and sarcasm was a substitute for strategy. For months, Marlene endured his dismissive glances, his constant praise of others while overlooking her entirely, and the occasional pointed comment about low-energy staff and bare minimum performers, until one gray Thursday morning, with rain sliding down the windows and anxiety buzzing through the air over rumored layoffs, Brian, standing in front of the team during a routine meeting, gestured vaguely toward Marlene and said, "Some people around here think hiding behind spreadsheets counts as productivity. We need real contributors, not ghosts," and though he didn't say her name, everyone turned to look at her, and her heart sank as laughter rippled around the room, soft but cruel, and she felt the familiar sting behind her eyes, that old ache that reminded her she was alone in this, that people only saw her silence and not her sacrifice, not the nights she stayed late to triple-check numbers, not the mornings she skipped breakfast to get the kids to school on time before catching the early train into the city. She bit her lip, said nothing, and counted the seconds until the meeting ended, then locked herself in the restroom, stood in front of the mirror, and asked herself how much more she could take, how long she would keep enduring this invisibility, this quiet cruelty dressed as office culture, and the tears came fast and hard, but she wiped them away just as quickly, because there was no time to fall apart. Her daughter Mia needed help with college applications, her son Lucas needed new soccer cleats, and the mortgage wasn't going to pay itself, but that night, something shifted, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough, a flicker of something long dormant, a voice that said, "You deserve better," and she listened. She pulled out a project she had quietly worked on months ago, a proposal for streamlining data entry and analysis that could potentially save the company thousands of dollars annually, but she'd shelved it after Brian scoffed at the mere mention of process improvements during one of their one-on-ones. This time, she decided to finish it, not for him, but for herself, and over the next 2 weeks, she worked late into the night after the kids had gone to bed, her dining table covered in charts, printouts, and coffee mugs, refining her proposal with meticulous detail. She included cost-benefit analyses, real-time data samples, performance comparisons, and a phased implementation strategy, and when it was ready, she printed it out, slid it into a sleek binder, and walked into the office of Daniel Hughes, the regional VP, heart pounding like a drum, hands trembling but voice clear as she said, "Sir, I believe this could really help the company. I'd be grateful if you took a look," and walked away before he could say anything. She didn't expect a miracle, only that someone would finally see the value she brought, not based on charisma or charm but on substance, on work, on truth. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet, and though Brian continued his sarcastic commentary and smug attitude, Marlene felt a strange sense of calm, as if she'd finally stopped asking for permission to matter, and then, on a Monday morning that began like any other, everything changed. An all-hands meeting was called, and when everyone gathered in the main conference room, Daniel stood at the front holding Marlene's binder, his expression serious but energized, and said, "We're about to implement a system that could save us over $120,000 a year, thanks to one employee who showed initiative, insight, and incredible diligence," and then, turning toward the crowd, he said her name. "Marlene Jenkins, and invited her to stand, and as she rose, slowly, unsure whether to smile or cry, or sit back down, the room erupted in applause, some enthusiastic, some stunned, and Brian looked like he'd swallowed a lemon, speechless for once in his smug career. Daniel went on to say that her proposal would be rolled out company-wide, that she would be leading the implementation team, and that she was being promoted to senior analyst effective immediately, and as Marlene stood there, blinking back tears, overwhelmed not by pride but by something deeper, validation, finally. She thought of her husband, of the nights he used to call her brilliant when no one else seemed to notice, and she whispered, just to herself, "You were right." In the weeks that followed, everything changed, not overnight, not magically, but meaningfully. People who had ignored her before now sought her input, asked for her feedback, thanked her for guidance. Brian, still managing the same team but with less swagger now, avoided eye contact and quietly removed the framed "World's Best Boss" mug from his desk. Marlene, meanwhile, used her new role not to bask in attention but to uplift others like her, the quiet ones, the single parents, the overlooked and underestimated, and she started a mentorship program within the company, offering one-on-one coaching, resume workshops, and even after-hours Zoom sessions for women returning to the workforce after years away. She shared her story not with bitterness but with courage, reminding others that dignity can bloom even in places of humiliation, that silence is not weakness, and that the people who shine quietly are often the ones carrying the most weight. Her daughter, inspired by her mother's newfound strength, applied to Columbia University and got in, writing her admissions essay about the power of resilience, and the night she saw her mother crying in the kitchen but still getting up the next morning to face the world. Her son, once quiet and unsure of his place, now walked a little taller at school, proudly telling his teachers that his mom was a leader at her company and had made things better for everybody. And Marlene, who still rode the same train to work, who still clipped coupons and budgeted carefully and wore the same navy coat she'd had for years, now walked with a lightness she hadn't felt in forever, not because life had become easy, but because she'd reclaimed her power. Because she had learned that when the world tries to shrink you with insult, you can either disappear or rise, and rising, even quietly, can be the most powerful rebellion of all. One afternoon, she found herself speaking at a women's leadership conference, standing before a crowd of 300 people, sharing her story with grace and humor, and afterward, a young woman approached her in tears and said, "I was thinking of quitting my job. I didn't think I mattered, but hearing you made me realize I'm not alone." And Marlene hugged her tightly and whispered, "You're never alone, you matter, and don't let anyone convince you otherwise." And in that moment, she knew that her journey, painful as it had been, had not only transformed her life, but was now rippling outward, touching others in ways she never imagined. And so, years after that terrible morning when she had been insulted in front of her peers, she now looked back not with anger but with gratitude, because that moment, that humiliation, had cracked open the shell she'd built around herself, forced her to remember her strength, and led her to a life not of ease, but of purpose, impact, and quiet triumph. And every time she saw someone slumped in defeat, hiding behind a screen or avoiding eye contact, she made it her mission to lift them up. Because she had been there, broken, overlooked, dismissed, and she had learned that sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one act of recognition, one moment of truth, one voice that dares to say, "You are seen."